We started a business, and even though this is going to sound crazy, but as a startup by yourself, we sit around and kind of look at each other and saying, all right, 0 to 100 million in revenue as fast as we can. 36 months later, we're looking around at each other, and that original group that sat around and set that goal, we're here, like, now what?
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Wes Palmisano. He's the founder, CEO, chief floor sweeper. That's right. He sweeps the floors as well at RNGD, based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly is RNGD? Well, to say it's a construction company would be limiting in several respects, as you will hear in this conversation. RNGD has a wide set of capabilities as a developer, as a construction manager. They do vertical integration, they self-perform, they deliver commercial construction projects, they deliver heavy civil projects. So they have a lot of capabilities, and this conversation with Wes can give you the story about what kind of growth is possible with a strong vision and a strong team. In just over 10 years, they've gone from 11 people to over 250 people, and from $0 in revenue to 3 years later, $100 million in revenue. And another 7 years, they just broke the $250 million barrier. So in this conversation, we talk about innovation. We talk about Renegade culture, what that means. And we talk about how strong leaders can cast a vision and connect with people to change behaviors on a day-to-day basis and attract new talent that truly sees companies doing something different. So we talk about all of that and more. You are really going to enjoy this conversation. I'm extremely confident in saying that. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Wes Palmisano, founder and CEO of RNGD, based in NOLA. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Wes Palmisano, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for you to be here. I mentioned before we flipped the mics on here, I went to New Orleans for the first time and had a wonderful time, outside the fact that my Chicago Bears very predictably lost to the Saints. But I got to see a project or two that were going on there, and I've been really looking forward to this. So maybe let's just start with your background. Give the audience a little bit of context about what life was like growing up as a third generation builder. Your grandfather kind of came back from World War II and he started building. So maybe give us a little context what that was like in your family.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I guess with that Saints win this season, I have to certainly throw in there a little who dat, being a New Orleans native. Yes. And so that's good to hear that the Saints actually had a good game against the Bears, because we did have our share of struggles this season and didn't end up in the playoffs, which was disappointing.
Just missed.
We did, down to the wire. But when you, of course, not ever a good strategy to count on other teams to lose to make the playoffs.
That's true. Yes.
But my background was, as I said a second ago, just growing up here in New Orleans, had a great legacy of a family that entered the industry just after World War II. My grandfather started building homes. With that post-war home building rush that happened around the country, he came back in 1950 and started as a carpenter, but then went into business for himself and started building homes. And then my dad and my uncle came up in that business, and I was fortunate enough to have all three of them as mentors in my upbringing. So I started at a very young age out at the job sites with them and really learn the trades. And so they were old school I think a great generation of builders that I had the opportunity to learn so much from. They were very hands-on. They did a lot of the work themselves and were what I would classify as kind of a real builder, which they didn't subcontract a lot of things. They just did it themselves and, were really proficient at all different types of work and trades. And so I got to grow up in that environment, working hands-on and learning the trades. And that's where I started. So amazing opportunity to learn the trades, to learn how things work on a job site, and to learn from some real savvy veterans of the business. And then coming out of that experience and really growing up that way, always at a job site, almost any time I was out of school, I was at a job site. And then went to school for construction management. And so, stayed here in the state, like I think many New Orleanians do. I ended up at LSU and had a great experience there as well. Went through their construction management program and learned, I guess, a little bit more of the professional side of the business with project management and kind of introduction to a different type of, or maybe a different viewpoint of the industry than what I grew up on these, kind of smaller scale residential projects, just working hands on. And so great opportunity to open some doors and start into larger project types. And so coming out of school, I started kind of at the lower ranks of the industry, working for a commercial construction company and really just kind of worked my way through the industry in a very typical manner, honestly, just, working for someone else and starting out in assistant project management, helping out in pre-con and spending some time in the field. And then ultimately, after 12 years of experience working in the commercial industry, started and founded our company. And so the founding of our company started as a building contractor, which is really the industry that I grew up in. So we were doing 100% commercial construction, not the residential work that my family had done traditionally. And so in getting started, my dad and my uncle were actually still working as a residential contractor. And I had this very aggressive vision for what I wanted to do. And so it actually started as a independent, separate business from the primary family business that had been around since 1950. And then we grew quickly, started to morph into infrastructure and heavy civil, which was another great learning opportunity for me. I love to consider myself a student of the industry, and the opportunity to learn something new is always just around the corner. So, I started in residential, kind of gravitated to commercial, and then into heavy civil. So today, the organization is a very traditional commercial building contractor. Then we do heavy civil and infrastructure work. And then we've also opened quite a few self-perform capabilities within the organization. So we're into some of maybe how I grew up and connecting back to the story of starting out in the trade. So we have some trade capabilities. And then our most recent venture over the last few years has been moving into a factory environment with prefabrication and manufacturing for construction. So today we tend to be a fairly complex organization where we've got a lot going on for sure.
Well, let me ask you about that aggressive vision. You're growing up, by the way, LSU is one of the best construction management programs in the country. So you go there, you come out. When did you, obviously you had recognized kind of what your grandfather, what your father was doing. You go in, you get more of the professional side, you learn from the professors and surely from other students that are there. When does the seed get planted that you want to do something that is different, but you also want to do it at scale? And to use your word, you are leaning towards aggressive. When did this start to come into your mind? And just curious, did you ever share that with your father and your grandfather? And what was that like internally, and what was that like within your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting journey because I can't say that light bulb went off when I was in school, because honestly, coming out of school, I just, really kind of had my head down. I knew I had so much to learn. And so I said, let me just find a good place to work and find a great job that I can go out and learn some more. So I would almost fast forward to around the time of Katrina, which is a big event in the city of New Orleans history in 2005. And I was about 5 years into my career at that point. I was a project manager at the time, running a few projects. And there was such opportunity that was created as a result of that disaster, which obviously was a terrible event in the city's history. But at the same time, from a construction perspective, there was tremendous opportunity for everyone that was in the industry at all levels, because there was so much work to be done. And then, government subsidies and help from the government flowed into the city to help us rebuild. And as that happened, we really started to get some momentum in the building space, and that created an opportunity for me to start to be a little more aggressive. Okay. And so I certainly kind of stuck my neck out and said, let me take more responsibility. And so I stayed with the company I was working for, but my career shifted very quickly into more of a leadership role. So I went from a project manager to more of a vice president type of role pretty quickly, and took a lot of responsibility and learned a tremendous amount through that experience. And then started some discussions within the family of some of the aspirations I had to take the family business, family name to another level. And so actually it fast forwarding a little bit, goes to a story in 2012, which in 2012, I went and sat down with my grandfather and we had a great relationship. We used to meet on a regular basis, and I would actually go stop by his house for lunch. He was 87 at the time, almost 88. And I sat down with him and had lunch, and we actually had a discussion about, hey, maybe it's time for me to make a transition. I was, I guess, 12 years in to my
early
career
30s.
at that point from after LSU. So I had about 12 years of experience after college. So maybe it's time to make a transition. And then coincidentally, within a week of that, he actually passed away of a massive heart attack. And so certainly a big event for me personally, but at the same time, it really kind of pushed me into action to say, all right, well, I need to start advancing the ball on what's next for me. And so I started a journey over the following 6 months, which culminated in a resignation from my position at the company I work for at the end of March of 2013. Okay. And so that kind of started in late August of 12, and March 30th of 13, I resigned and then started the company a few days afterwards. So we started beginning of April of 13 with this very aggressive vision for where we wanted to head and an opportunity to challenge the status quo of the industry. Of course, starting out here locally in New Orleans, but aspirations and goals are certainly much bigger than that. And that journey started as a typical entrepreneurial journey back in April of 13.
Well, I want to jump to, maybe I'm sure this ties in here. You talk about the Renegade culture, the WJP Renegade culture, which immediately kind of speaks to me. I'm like, let's do something different. Let's be aggressive. That certainly speaks to my soul. And then I'm wondering, are there limits to the Renegade culture? Because at a certain point, you're like, well, on a long enough timeline, or, you go far enough to the right, renegades can turn into, they can build mutinies quickly. Talk to me about that, maybe just the language and the behaviors. Like, what does that mean to people in it? And how does that connect with how people behave on a day-to-day basis?
So that, maybe to start, and I'll go a couple of different directions
Sure.
here. To start off with, renegade mentality is one of our core values for the organization, which obviously is a very unique core value. And so I'll give you a little insight into how that developed and what it means for myself and the team. As we got started in 13, that was not a core value day one, because we came out as kind of challengers in the local construction market. We were a new business. We had this big vision. We were aggressive, certainly. And so it was actually a trade partner that tagged us as a team. We had a small team at the time. First year, we had finished the year out with 11 people. Okay. And so, of course, very small business, brand new company. We're 3 or 4 months in business. We've had this small team. And one of our trade partners called one day and said, "What are you going to do, renegades?" And so used this word in referring to us as a team, because he said, "Y'all are a bunch of renegades out here, super aggressive, challenging the status quo in the market." So that really just, I think, stuck for me and for others on the team and the organization. It's a small team. It became this kind of rallying cry that turned into, what is our renegade approach on each project, which means how can we make it better? So for internally, it honestly is pretty simple in that, yes, the word renegade, if you go search the dictionary meaning of it, certainly can get into things like being a deserter of a cause. To us internally, it's certainly not that.
Sure.
It's this willingness to challenge the status quo of the traditional past in order to build a better future. And so we're pretty tight in terms of how we define that and what it means to us as a value. And at the same time, how that translates into actions on something like a project. So at the beginning of every job, we sit down and we talk about the Renegade approach, which is our plan for the project and how are we going to drive value for our clients. And so that Renegade becomes a very positive meaning in our culture when we're talking about, let's find a way to do something different that's going to create value for our client and differentiate us from the typical construction company that's just going to generally take a set of plans and build whatever's shown on the plans. So that Renegade approach to a job is generally, how can we be better, faster, cheaper? How can we bring real value to our clients in the way that we're thinking about it and challenge the status quo on each project, and then accordingly challenge the status quo of the broader industry, of each market we enter. And so that really caught on within our industry, and at all levels of our organization, it's turned into something that's extremely positive. Where we have people out at the job site, even from a craft perspective, that are then turning around and saying, hey, I've got this Renegade idea of how I can be better, more efficient, faster at what I'm doing. And so throughout the organization, it really permeated and became something that is a huge driver of our success. And that value is extremely positive. And then we like to couple with that some things that are more traditional that create balance, I think. So we're not just only renegades. We have these other values that I think start to balance things out. And the other one that really sticks in our culture was inspired by my grandfather, my dad, my uncle, and the way I grew up, and it's sweep floors. And so that sweep floors value is one that no one's above any task. We're not going to have a lot of hierarchy in the organization.
Yeah.
We're going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And so that sweep floors mindset is really this kind of very traditional construction value that kind of balances out this maybe edgy renegade mentality.
Well, I think what's really smart about it and why people are gravitating toward it, whether they're, by the way, the fact that it came from a trade partner, makes the story so much even better. It's one thing to look at each other and we're renegades, right? Versus someone saying, here's what I see in you guys. And sometimes whether it's a customer or it's a prospect or it's a competitor, they label that and you just take it, I think is so powerful. But also with the sweeping floors, you guys are identifying core values that have outsiders like me leaning in to say, tell me more about that, right? I'm sure you would love it. You sit down with, a prospective client and they're like, all right, I got to ask, tell me about this renegade thing because, give me the context. That's what you want. You want people asking to hear your story and where this came from. And I see it's not uncommon if you were to see a lot of CEOs or people on high levels, they will put something about whether it's a floor sweeper or this or that. And I get it. They're saying, hey, yes, I will pick up the trash at the end of the day and I'm running a several $100 million organization. But I think when you have as a core value and you say, hey, no one is above anything, including me, all of a sudden, that is much different than potentially some false humility. So I love that. I want to read something to you maybe on the vision, because I'm sure the culture ties into this here. Maybe share with us a little bit of the vision here. You wrote, vision is just an idea until you bring together a group of relentless renegades to help build it. You have gone over the last decade from that core group of 11 to 220 plus people. I often find that I struggle with in my organization. I know some of our clients do, whether they have 20 people or they have 500 people, about casting a vision and from a leadership perspective, making sure it's something that people can almost feel and touch and see and move towards together versus, I don't know, every company has to have a vision. Wes has one. Yeah, I guess we're going this way, but I gotta focus on meet and schedule. Talk to me about how you, maybe over the last decade, casted that vision and did it consistently to where I got to imagine a big part of your aggressive dreams have come true.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think what comes to mind at first is to refer back even to the conversation we just had about core values, which core values, when they're authentic, is really where I think you find success. And so the authenticity that we have in our values and the fact that they organically emerged out of who we are, the characteristics of the team, where we found success. And so that authenticity, I think, is the reason that the core values have been such a cornerstone for us in terms of our journey. And I would say the same as it relates to purpose. So to go back to your question on purpose, I think there's got to be a level of authenticity. It can't just be something on the wall. It has to be something that is alive and breathing every single day when you show up. And so it's integrated into everything you do. So there's this constant reinforcement. Now, I guess also on vision, core values, mission, we put a tremendous amount of energy and effort into trying to create alignment across the organization, which, I mentioned integrating into everything that you do. And just to give a couple of examples, I think it relates to the journey of each team member as well. So as we're sitting down and we're talking about at the interview stage, when we're talking to someone about potentially joining the team, we have a very specific set of questions, discussions that revolve around our business, our values, and who we are, that when our team is talking to someone, there's this consistency of making sure that we've got alignment for both the individual who's trying to join the team and for us. Do we have a real fit here, and are we going to be aligned in the way that we see the world? And so I think starting at that stage to then translating to onboarding. Our onboarding process is very intentional around values, culture, history. And so one of the things we do, I actually still today, you mentioned team count, and we're rapidly growing. We're up to just at 250 now.
Wow.
So we're constantly growing and hiring, and certainly have continued aggressive growth plans. And even at that size, I still meet personally with new members of the team as part of their cultural immersion to share some of the stories of how the values were generated, to talk about our vision and mission. And so it's a very intentional approach. And then, you go to standard operating procedures. Within our operating procedures, we have things that relate back to how are we challenging the status quo on every project? How are we accomplishing and achieving our mission in the types of work we do, how we approach the job, how we show up for our clients? And so, we're starting to integrate little bits and pieces into everything that flows through the organization. And then along the way, we've also done some things that are, not necessarily in that embedded way, kind of out in front of you. We have books that tie in our values and who we are as a business. And so there's a series of company books that we've published over the years that actually put that information in the hands of our team and actually encourage them to challenge us if we're not being consistent and authentic with the message that we're putting out there. And so, certainly there's not one magical answer. It's a matter of integrating that into everything you do, and then the consistency and the authenticity of how you show up every single day. And how do we stay, you used the word relentless earlier, but relentless on our march towards this vision and making sure that we're maintaining that consistency throughout the entire team.
Was there a point in your growth over the last several years where you say, hey, we got this aggressive vision, we're going after it? At a certain point, you were either understanding that you were well on that trajectory, if not outpacing it. Was there any sort of intuitive sense or any plan that said, hey, we have to recast this vision because we're on pace or we're ahead of pace? And any idea like when that happened?
Yeah, I think we've done that twice.
Okay.
Once, our original business goal was very straightforward. We started a business, and even though this is going to sound crazy, but as a startup by yourself, we hired the first handful of team members. We sit around and kind of look at each other and saying, all right, 0 to 100 million in revenue as fast as we can. I mean, that's not the typical startup construction company goal, but that's what we did. And so actually 36 months later, we're looking around at each other, and that original group that sat around and set that goal, it was an interesting discussion because 36 months later, we're looking at each other saying, okay, we're here. Like, now what?
That's wild.
And so it was tremendous success out of the gate. Certainly we achieved that goal significantly faster than what we anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm certainly the first to admit that we outpaced what our original business plan would have suggested. And so it was about what's next. So our next step, that as we kind of recast the vision, as you characterized it, is how can we now start to get significantly more robust? And so this sprint that we originally started on now has to transition to maturity as a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so we spent the next 5 years building in significant additional capabilities that didn't necessarily move the revenue number. We actually, for the next 5 years, kind of hung around 100, 125 million. So we didn't really grow from a revenue perspective, but the business became significantly more mature. So operating process and procedures, technologies, self-perform capabilities. We started a heavy civil division. We started a concrete division. We started an architectural millwork division. And so it was just all these little things that we started to build, and it became building blocks that team count went up dramatically as a result of that growth, but not necessarily revenue. And we became significantly more mature as a business. Then, I guess around the time of COVID, we rolled out a new vision. So we were confident going into 2020, and it was just, nice time to do it. Let's roll out a 10-year plan, 2020 to 2030.
Sure.
So we roll out this 10-year plan, and every year we have an annual meeting where we bring together everyone and try to create alignment around our business plan. We roll out this very aggressive growth plan. So, at this point, we're kind of 5 years beyond. We put all the fundamental pieces in place. We're ready to grow. We roll it out in January of 2020. COVID hits in March. So we thought we were well positioned. 150 million in backlog disappears overnight. And then we're left kind of looking around at each other again because we had such confidence that we were going to grow. And then in March, just a few months after rolling out this plan, I guess the storyline that we immediately prescribed to internally is the Mike Tyson quote of, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Right.
So that one was interesting and certainly a point of digging deep for us as an organization to sit around the table and look at each other and saying, okay, this growth plan is not going to necessarily happen the way that we thought it was going to unfold because we thought we had all of our backlog lined up and everything was ready to go. And so we had to pivot. Now, what I'll say about business planning in our organization is that this true north and this idea that the destination doesn't change. We just have to be flexible and be able to modify the road that we take to get there. And so we definitely pivoted. We started to work in some new markets. We started to work more regionally where we had opportunities. We weren't so tied to the city of New Orleans. We started to work in some new market sectors. We started to aggressively pursue more heavy civil and infrastructure work because the public bid market was still moving forward. And so we definitely pivoted, but again, got better as a result of that challenge. And so the next step in our growth plan, and this was in that 2020 plan, we actually recognized this year. So in our last year, just ended. In 2023, we crossed the $250 million revenue threshold. So we closed out the year at about $257 million in revenue. So we've kind of recognized our double in size as a next step in our growth journey. And we're actually now rolling out the next phase of that vision. So that was kind of another base camp. And we just look at it as we're on this long-term journey.
Yeah.
And each one of these milestones kind of becomes a base camp for us. And so we're in the process and actually have our next company meeting on February 1st, where we'll roll out the next phase of our growth plan.
That's exciting to hear. I love the fact that the line you said of the destination doesn't change. How we get there. All right. What do we need to do? How do we look internally? And we had, all of us went through our own experience personally and professionally when COVID hit, but there were a lot of leaders that, April 1 said, all right, we're going to change everything because I don't want to have this entire year be a negative when we can't achieve the goals. And then they kind of turned around. So they made those changes. They turned around in June and July and realized that the collective economy in construction, maybe less so commercial than residential, but also, well, the whole economy just put their foot on the gas. And now all of a sudden they're like, actually, that goal I said we weren't going to do, we are going to do that now. And I think to your point of saying, it's all right, control what we can control. How do we look at each other and say the destination doesn't change? How do we continue on there?
I mean, a great example on that destination doesn't change, maybe just slightly different methodology. A lot of the backlog that we had lined up at the time was in the hospitality industry. And we had done a tremendous amount of hospitality for the years prior to COVID. Well, hospitality projects didn't come back and rebound quickly, and we knew they would. So we said, okay, what can we do with these teams that we had slated to go to hospitality projects? And so we actually jumped into affordable housing in a big way, which we had a background in. So it wasn't the first project we had done, but we made a push and we started doing affordable housing work statewide around Louisiana. And so we actually spread out geographically and picked up affordable housing projects where those same teams who had done hospitality, it's a place where people sleep is the way we look at it internally. And so those same teams can go into this workforce in affordable housing that had government subsidies in it and the type of projects that could move forward in a challenging environment where the hospitality projects couldn't get financed.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure what appeared at the time to be a huge negative, over time, you retain the capability of what you're able to do with hospitality. Now we gain the capability of doing affordable housing. That's great. I want to ask you about some vertical integration here. You say you guys are pursuing a vertical integration of service offerings that allow WJP to influence the construction life cycle and continue applying its Renegade approach. Tell me where kind of the vertical integration, we talked about building as a product versus not a service. Maybe just take this any way you want, because I think it's a really interesting, different look on how a construction company can grow.
Yeah. I have always really been, well, and I'll say in 18, so our 5-year point, we started in 13. So in 18, I actually thought about what would really drive me and excite me as a, more of a long-term career progression goal. And I just thought it was always interesting to be able to, you mentioned vertical integration. So for the building industry, the way that we've always seen that showing up is this ability to be able to design, manufacture, and construct virtually entire buildings. So with our capabilities in the civil and concrete space, we can certainly do site work and foundations. And then from the site work and foundation, show up with fabricated component part approach to building. So not volumetric modular, but kit of parts approach where we'd show up with a prefabricated structural system and proprietary structural system, a prefabricated facade, an entire skin system, prefabricated MEP backbone, and then prefabricated interior components. So being able to then put together and deliver the vast majority of the systems in any given type of building out of our shop and manufacturing and factory environment, which all those different component parts and pieces being designed and engineered in-house. And so that is this long-term perspective that for us as an organization, we're not in a position to go out in the way that certainly we're aware of many other organizations that have tried to do similar things. And I guess the most recent and maybe well-known is an organization like Katera,
right, that
started in 15, made this big push, raised a bunch of outside capital, and tried to do something in industry that I think at its core, the vision was great, but maybe the execution was not what the industry was ready for. And so we look at it as being very grounded in the traditional paths of the industry, and certainly being grounded in, we started with my early journey and the way I grew up. And so kind of being grounded in the traditions of the industry and being very respectful of the traditions that have made the industry great, while also knowing that incrementally on each project, there's an opportunity to take one step. And so for us, it's a very long-term vision that we know on each project, we could take a few more steps in that direction. And so a good example of that vertical integration today, to kind of bring some of the big picture discussion that I just stated down into the real world, is a project that we're actually doing in Huntsville, Alabama right now. And so, I'm sitting in New Orleans today, but we do work in Nashville, and one of our recent expansions is Huntsville. And in Huntsville, we're actually building a project that we are developing. So I guess in a way, the way that we've approached this is kind of put your money where your mouth is type of approach. And we're always trying to let ourselves be the guinea pig. And so we're trying this new approach to building, and we're doing that mock-up on a project where we're developing, designing, manufacturing, constructing. And so we're going to manufacture a significant portion of that Huntsville project here in our shop in New Orleans, and then ship it to Huntsville and erect it there. And so this is some of the real world manifestation of that strategy, and trying to push the envelope and over time learn more and more about how we can bring efficiencies to the construction process by moving more work off-site and into a manufactured environment.
And what type of project is it in Huntsville?
That project is an office. So what I'd call a very typical commercial building that ends up with, on the ground floor, there's a restaurant space, and then we've got office space above that. And so we've got kind of a proprietary structural system that internally we've tagged it as the Renegade beam. So not surprisingly, we're using a steel backbone in terms of the primary structural frame. And so we've got the Renegade beam integrated in there. We're going to fabricate the facade in a panelized approach. And then through our architectural fabrications group, we're going to fabricate a bunch of the interior components as well. And so, we're starting to lean in that direction to be able to do more of the work off-site while also deploying our own crews in the on-site application. So I mentioned civil and concrete. We have the steel erection crews that'll actually put up the building. So, the crews and the troops are aligned both in the shop and in the field to be able to pull all that together. And so our current theme for the organization is this concept of removing some of the silos and really bringing everyone together in this one team, one mission. How can we leverage the collective capabilities of the organization to develop a superior project and ultimately provide a tremendous amount of value to our clients?
Got it. Now, do you guys own the dirt as the developer as well?
Yes.
So this is full integration there. Well, I think going down the Katerra angle could be a rabbit hole there, but I kind of view the Katerra situation as overall, I completely agree with you. The vision, I think they did a lot of really things that were smart to move us forward. I think it was what I kind of described the OPM problem, when it's other people's money and it's a lot of money, things can get out of whack and skewed and aggressive to the point where, now we're going to manufacture our own light bulb filaments. Is that what we should be doing? But I think what you guys are doing hey, you guys have a lot of skin in the game, and regardless of what happens, you're going to learn from it, and knock on wood, hey, we can make money from it and increase our capabilities. I think that's just that's exciting. I want to learn more. We won't do that now, but that's really cool. You had talked about, kind of before we flip the mics on, I was going to ask you kind of about the collective of brands and initiatives. You said, hey, we're actually going through a transformation of bringing them, kind of moving away from a house of brands to consolidating those. Maybe just tell us from a leadership perspective on the branding and the communication and just seeing the work that you guys do from public relations and getting out there and communicating. How much of that weighs on kind of your top agenda, and how much time do you allocate towards that when it's a little bit softer, but you could argue, hey, the branding and your promise to the market and how you guys are changing is of utmost priority. Maybe walk us through just a little bit on how you prioritize and execute that of kind of bringing in these different brands you've created.
Yeah. Some of my team likes to joke around with me because from back in the beginning, we recognize the importance of marketing and branding. And actually, someone reminded me recently that the first check that we actually wrote as a business, and at the time seemed like a huge expense, was to a branding agency that helped us set up the original brand. And so we placed that level of importance on it that I think was also maybe a little unique for a brand new startup construction company, but we always recognize the importance of marketing and branding. Now, over time, I'll say, and certainly personally take the blame for what I look back as maybe, we had some missteps along the way in our marketing and branding strategy that I was very close to. Certainly I was the one making a lot of those decisions of, as the organization grew in complexity and developed these new capabilities, we made this decision to go this house of brands approach. And you mentioned that a second ago, in that we started to go down all these different pathways where it became really complex. And what ended up happening in our experience is that with that complexity of running all these different brands, it certainly has been a challenge for the marketing people in our organization to juggle all these different hats and multiple social media accounts and multiple websites and, all the complication that comes with running multiple brands. And what was interesting, and the piece I love about it, to give our teams a lot of credit, is that people around the organization started to kind of raise their hand and say, all right, so like, what are we doing here? We have all these different brands that we're running when really we just want to be on the same team, because we show up at the job site with 3 different companies, and we've got 3 different companies that are all wholly owned subsidiaries of the parent that are working on the same job site. And like, this is silly. We got different hard hats. We got different vests. Like, can't we just be on the same team here? So you start out the call with the Saints and the Bears, it's like same parent company and same team at the end of the day. So, they're kind of looking around on the job site and saying like, hey, why don't we all have the same hard hat? Why don't we all have the same vest? Like, let's just act like a team here. And so the teams, as that developed and that strategy moved forward, just really overwhelmingly wanted to push forward in this one team mindset. So that's, I alluded to this a minute ago, of that theme of one team, one mission. Let's kind of bring everything together, have a singular mission for the organization, a singular brand. And so, not surprisingly, the decision that we made is to unite everyone underneath our RNGD brand, which obviously short for Renegade. So, we talked about that a lot during the call. And again, like through a poll with the team, it was, all right, if we're all going to be on one team, which team are we going to use?
Right.
Because we've got these different brands now that have developed. Well, if we're going to pick one to be the singular brand, let's pick one. So, again, kind of by the vote of the people, that word and what it means to us as an organization is so special that they're saying this is the authentic version of us. So let's unite underneath the RNGD umbrella, which, our tagline's Renegade Thinking, Revolutionary Results. So it was this opportunity to really bring that together and then publish a vision for the organization that, I mentioned we're going to roll out at our company meeting on February 1st, 10 days from now or so.
That's wonderful. I think it's a great way to kind of tie it all in here. I do want to ask you one question before I let you go. I see a whole pile of books back there. I'm a book nerd. I'm always kind of looking for, hey, what has been impactful for other leaders that have been on the show. I'll give you a little frame of reference. So maybe you're speaking to a segment of the audience that is maybe where you guys were, 5-6 years in, where you have this initial vision, you grow, and then congratulations, you're there. Now you have to regroup and say, now we got to grow again. And essentially we got to rethink everything. Does any book stand out maybe within kind of that context for a book that you would recommend, or maybe one that you read at that time, or you think, hey, I think there's a thread that we could pull on there for someone who's kind of in that situation? You've been successful, but your goals now are much bigger. Anything come to mind?
So books, reading and learning have been a huge part of our growth journey.
Okay.
Even so much so that every year we get together, and from an executive team perspective, we'll read together in a book club type of format.
Okay.
Things that we think are inspirational. So there's been many books and things that we've drawn inspiration from over the years on different topics, depending on what we're working on at the time, whether it's culture, marketing, branding, business development, people side, engagement and employee experience, our programming associated with academy and leadership development. So anyway, there's all these different buckets, but from, I would say, the most impactful, and this is probably a very typical answer, but the Jim Collins series is the one that I'd say that for us has always been grounding. So last year, we actually went back through Great by Choice.
Okay.
And that was something that we used as a framework to relook at our strategy, our long-term vision, our mission, and how do we restate things. So we were careful about not making some, it's not a complete change, but how can we restate, maybe get clearer about what our values are, make sure that we're really clear. So we try to revisit that every 5 years or so. And we did that last year that we're in the process of rolling out. And Great by Choice was a framework that we used to reorient ourselves with some of the principles that, we started off. The first book we read back in 2013 was Good to Great.
Okay.
And so, the entire series, there's so much great material in there that can help keep you grounded and make sure that you're always testing and in a good place with your strategy and vision.
Got it. Well, I'm always kind of thinking as we're talking, I'm like, what's the title of this episode going to be for Wes? You got, I think, Great by Choice. I think we got to use Renegade. That's kind of a no-brainer in there. That has come up and I love that. But I think what you guys have done, you've made choices. You've made really clear your intentions and you've had the vision and you put together a really great team. Obviously, that has met and exceeded those goals and regrouped. And anyway, it's crazy to me to hear just the growth and success. And I can also see joy that you've got from growing this team from 11 people to 250, couple $100 million, $250+ million. So I appreciate you making time for this and congratulations on all your success and thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Wes Palmisano, and I'm excited to learn more about this project they are doing in Huntsville and really understand how they're able to really do a lot of this vertical integration, to see what they've learned, to see how successful it was, because whether it's within one company or a team of companies, going to panelization, going to components, going to prefab, this is the future. And companies, very much like RNGD is doing now, finding ways to increase their capabilities to do it in a small scale on one project and to do it larger. That is absolutely what will drive our industry forward. So I'm excited to see their progress, what went well and what insights they've learned from that. So maybe down the road, that is going to be part 2 of this conversation. As for you, thank you for listening. I don't have anything else. I'm out. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.